Jesus.
Now that's good television.
I hate this channel.
Box bites. He's the cheesed-off champion of channel chasing. He's lean, mean, and is the screen. He speaks with the alpha and omega of whiny white boy voices. And that's coming from the guy who sounds like he uses Wonder Bread as a pop filter. It's Vox, everyone's favorite V-tier celebrity and confirmed big bad of the upcoming Hazbin Hotel Season 2. I'll admit, Vox was never really a character I was super excited to see in action. I mean, aside from his hellfire-fueled feud with old Radiohead and the inevitable pyrocynical memes, I didn't see much reason to be thrilled about his inclusion in Vivzie's series. He was a set dressing in the pilot at best, and even his wiki facts weren't much to write home about, so my expectations were about as low as his home turf. But after only a few short appearances in Season 1, I was left with the feeling that this dude had massive potential. Not just as an interesting character, but as a potential commentary on the shifting scales of subjectivity in modern media. How both it and its consumers have managed to evolve and devolve simultaneously. Yeah, turns out old Flatface is not as one-dimensional as I thought. What do I mean by all of this? Well, top of the hour, and we're discussing a certain cloud chaser who's been showing Instability for 2 episodes now. Where did he come from? What does this picture mean? More in today's video. As always, let's start by cracking open that owner's manual and seeing what makes this TV tick. Vox is a walking, talking picture box who supposedly met his maker in the 1950s. He's part of Hell's biggest 3-part media conglomerate, the Vees, alongside Velvette and Valentino. He's extremely adamant on keeping their collective image as flawless and imposing as possible, often labeling their brand as perfection. To accomplish this, he uses everything from corporate lies to fake smiles to straight-up hypnosis in an effort to both grow his audience and keep them tuned in. He's even willing to physically augment himself with more modern-day parts to keep up with the trends, as proven by this old photo in Valentino's office depicting him with one of those old box-style TVs for a head. Alright, seems like your typical manipulative CE overlord at first, but what's on screen is not as well composed as you'd think. While Vox gives off the impression of being the most level-headed V, with the fairly calm way he deals with his, business partner, he's actually proven to be the most unstable and emotionally volatile of the trio when properly provoked. And trust me, when you've got a dude who can blow a city's power grid with a single Angie outburst, you better pray that he stays in a zen state as often as possible. I hear he can apparently play videos on his screen, so that's a tried and tested way to stay relaxed. Provided he plays the right ones. So yeah, this seemingly suave sales pitcher who appears to always be in control is literally the most emotionally charged when you push the right buttons. And in my opinion, the most interesting part of his character involves a particularly sensitive one. Can someone say, Alastor?
Alastor.
I hate that guy!
Yup, turns out these two titans of tech are in a bit of a beef at the moment. One that stays just mysterious enough to be intriguing. Based on info both inside and outside the show, these two apparently used to be well acquainted in the past until a major falling out that put them at odds with each other. Vox even asks Alastor to join his team at one point, an offer that Alastor refused to take up on, likely based on his bias against newer technology. Vox, meanwhile, is all too eager to embrace new trends, so it makes sense that these conflicting ideologies would lead to a rift in their relationship and eventually end with them going their separate ways. There is evidence to suggest that this separation is much deeper than just radio good, TV bad, but we'll talk about that later. Bottom line, this pair has been locked in a violent feud for years now. And while Vox assumes that Al has gone missing and he can now expand without worry, we'll see just how well his plans pan out when he discovers that this radio is still on the air. Honestly, Season 2 can't come soon enough. Well, that checks off every factual box for old Vox, but we're far from done here. Because now it's time to dive deep into his character and show how his tragic past not only sent him on a downward spiral, but also made him emblematic of some of the things you could see in today's media. Let's talk about subjective journalism. Subjective journalism is defined as the creation of informative media that focuses not on the presentation of impartial facts, but instead on personal opinions and biases.
Objection! Lame and unoriginal.
You're literally just Beetlejuice with wings and a package the size of your name, so you stay out of this. Anyway, as a practice, I think subjective journalism is completely fine. It allows readers to see current events through the lens of the author, and maybe even walk away with an interesting new way of thinking and/or point of view. That is, when the author is being honest. Just like how voodoo isn't inherently evil but does have a darker side to it, so too does subjective journalism. Some of the notorious people in this sphere often try to present their one-sided takes as objective fact, playing on the emotions of their readers and certain cultural biases in order to push an agenda or target a group or person. Sometimes they even cherry-pick information to support their arguments while completely ignoring everything that contradicts them. Not only is this really scummy, but it's also pretty pathetic too. It's one thing to present a transparent, opinionated piece, but straight up lying to and manipulating your audience just to make your point seem stronger not only spreads misinformation, but also just makes it clear that you have no actual ground to stand on. And everything we're shown with Vox not only manages to be scarily accurate to what these people can actually be like, but it's also really funny and even a bit deep. Even before we see the guy's face, we're shown that Voxtech Enterprises is notorious for manipulating its customer base by preying on their emotions and forming a supposed personal bond with them, perfectly illustrated in the company's motto, "Trust us with your blank." This means that before Vox even does anything journalistic, his viewers already have a manufactured bias going in, allowing him to feed them all the half-truths and straight-up lies he wants. This is a common tactic used by some news networks to connect with the viewer's humanity and assure everyone that you can trust everything we say, no need to look elsewhere, we're just like you, see? Speaking of seeing, this whole concept of subjective manipulation is exactly why I find Vox's hypnotic eye power so interesting. On the surface, it's your basic tool used by baddies to get others to obey them. But the fact that Vox always starts a hypnosis with his company's signature "Trust Us" slogan,
Trust us with your entertainment.
Trust us with your safety.
can actually be interpreted as subjective outlets using their personal connection to viewers as a failsafe so they can reel them back to their side if they do anything dumb or someone tries to debate them. Plus, the fact that the hypnosis comes out of one eye instead of both shows that Vox is desperate to prevent his viewers from seeing both sides of a situation and just trusting him blindly. So far, Vox seems like a real manipulative mastermind who's got everything remotely under control. But the whole situation switches gears when our sinful Telly starts sing-talking. I mentioned before that Stay Gone is one of my favorite songs in the show, and it's not just for the catchy as hell music and perfect pair of performances, but also because of how thoroughly Vox gets his screen kicked in, and how his portrayal can easily apply to people just like him IRL. After an admittedly pretty sweet first part where Vox seems genuinely intimidating, the rest of his solo verses involve berating Alastor as quickly and hilariously as possible. But let's take a look at some of those lyrics real quick. When he finally starts taking potshots at the radio demon, what exactly does he say? He calls him a loser, a fossil, and a coward. He says that his medium is rare and he's barely audible, and he insists that his viewers not listen to a word he says or give him the time of day. Now, to be fair, some of these statements do have some truth to them. Al is definitely a fossil, which is an old guy who's opposed to new ideas. And you could argue that someone who's closed-minded is not always worth listening to in the modern age. But he also calls him a loser and a coward, even confirming that you can take that as gospel. Not only does he present zero evidence to back up those claims, but things like loserdom and cowardice are not set-in-stone concepts. One person's definition of a coward could be completely different from someone else's. Refusing to punch someone in the face because they insulted you might make you a coward in someone's eyes, while to others you're considered strong and capable of restraint. So there's Vox's first strike right there, telling his audience to take opinionated statements as truths. The fact that Alastor's barely audible and his medium is rare are technically true, but what's the point of including them? The medium Alastor uses and the aesthetic faults like poor audio quality don't make what he's gonna say any less valid. It would be annoying to listen to someone who sounds like a Wendy's drive-thru speaker, but it's not really something that strengthens his Alastor is not worth listening to argument. And of course, he begs and pleads for his audience to just trust what he says without even giving Alastor a chance to present his piece, which pretty much speaks for itself. So in Vox's half of the song, we've already got opinionated statements presented as truths, statements that do nothing to make his argument stronger, and emotional manipulation that's the equivalent of, hey, you've trusted us for so long, you don't need to listen to him, just listen to us. Heck, if you really want to stretch things, you can even say that his crude depiction of Alastor during the first segment is similar to how one uses doctored or out-of-context footage to try and further their points. All telltale signs of a reporter who tries to come off as impartial and factual while having literally nothing to back themselves up. Then we have Alastor's verse. Now, I'm not going to say that Alastor is a paragon of objectivity or anything, but he does show how easily a person like Vox can crumble when any contradictory evidence is thrown at them. It's like a bowling ball hitting a popsicle stick house. It has no chance. So what does Alastor say in response? He calls Vox's show a clout-chasing mediocre podcast. He says that he's insecure, pursuing a lore, he flips between fads, and each day he has a different format, and even his strength is called into question when he says that he'd be powerless without the other Vees. 90% of what he said there is just facts, and he's even able to back them up. The idea that he's insecure and pursuing a lore is completely true, and the fact that he flips between fads and constantly changes formats is solid proof of that. He claims that Vox is not as strong as he says, mentioning that Velvette and Valentino are the ones doing all the heavy lifting. Not only does the duo smile when he says that, implying that even they agree it's true, but it's been predicted by many people that the only reason Vox won his previous fight against Alastor is because the Vees backed him up, making it a 3 against 1. Even the way Val teases Vox about almost losing the fight makes it seem like he had a hand in helping him win. And what does Vox say in response to all this? Alastor's old, and don't listen to him. Very solid comeback, dude. Well done. But the big climax comes when Alastor gets personal and mentions the fact that he rejected Vox's offer at a partnership, leading to Vox devolving into straight-up insults and death threats while Alastor keeps a cool head, ending in Vox's voice being completely silenced by his power surge. This song shows off better than words exactly what I'm getting at here. In reality, bad subjective journalists don't write news. They write thinly veiled hate pieces and propaganda disguised as articles. And when put up against even the smallest amount of scrutiny, the authors break down and devolve into pure emotion-fueled tirades, death threats, and other pathetic behavior. And I'm not pointing at a specific group or network here. It's a practice that can be done anywhere by anyone. When you think of fictional villains who use media as one of their main tools, most of the time they either truly believe in what they say and have clear facts to support their claims, or they have a secret agenda but are extremely good at hiding it through sneaky tactics and manipulation. But Vox is a more realistic take on these kinds of media giants that we see in our everyday lives. Because despite their often massive reach and Big Brother-esque presence, when you actually open both eyes, you realize just how flawed and substanceless they can be sometimes. Vox not only acts as a cartoony parody of people in a similar vein as him, but also as a bit of a cautionary tale for viewers who might be watching them. Listen, if you have a single source of news that you trust with your life and refer to for all your information on current topics, then maybe consider stopping. If you really want to stay properly informed, you gotta seek out news from multiple different places. Read or watch coverage of the same event on different networks. Compare and contrast what they all include or what some of them leave out. And don't let any long-term trust biases get in your way. I know subjective connections to a person or a company can be a powerful thing, to the point where they can spout out complete first-grade gibberish and still have people who support them. But you gotta look past that if you want a balanced view of what's going on in the world. Not only is Vox hilarious in all the usual Helliverse ways, but also due to how quickly his empire can crumble with a single opposing voice. So, now that we've concluded that Vox is truly pathetic at his core, do I still think he would make for a good Season 2 villain? Yes, and for 2 reasons. First of all, his instability. If there's one thing that Vox has above other media clowns, it's his demonic abilities. Abilities that we haven't seen the full scope of quite yet. And while he seems to be in a good position at the end of Season 1, I could totally see him going full-on brawn over brains sooner rather than later. During finale, he mentions that after the battle, there's masterless cattle and overlords hanging by a thread. I'm not sure how true this is, cause wasn't the whole point that the exterminators all came to Charlie's hotel first, lost the fight, and then left without going anywhere else, hence why the extermination was cancelled? But going off the assumption that Vox was right about this, the Vees would definitely be able to grow their influence at least a little bit at first. But after Alastor recuperates and gets his newly refurbished radio tower up and running, I imagine that he'll return to the airwaves and start attacking Vox once again. As more and more people start to see just how pathetic Vox is behind the scenes, both as a trustworthy CEO and a menacing overlord, they'll all end up boycotting Voxtech products and his iron grip on the underworld will start to loosen. I mean, you can't really hypnotize folks if they don't trust you enough to watch, right? Heck, I wouldn't be surprised if his first public blunder already cost him a few loyal fans. And then, only when Vox's perfect brand is shattered beyond repair would we see the full scope of his power unleashed in a fit of retaliation and rage. He would conceal all the souls he's collected and even obtain more with sheer brute force, becoming an actual imposing threat that almost anyone would struggle to defeat. And if you're wondering what I imagine his true demon form would look like, I'm thinking Omega Flowey from Undertale. You know, screen in the middle, a bunch of cable tendrils reaching out, it's too perfect. But in my eyes, even if Vox manages to curb stomp Alastor and take over the majority of the Pride Ring, I still don't think that would truly satisfy him. Which leads me to my second point on why he'd make a great villain, his emotional depth. Remember before how I said that the whole Al versus Vox feud started with a falling out? How their disagreement about technology led to some literal crossed wires? Well, there's clearly a lot more to the story than just that. The show makes it extremely obvious that Vox has a bizarre obsession with Alastor. He's the one who initiates the whole State God debacle, trying to host a smear campaign against the radio demon. He gets extremely emotional whenever Alastor is involved in something, being super angry when he succeeds and overly excited when he fails. Not to mention the subtle evidence, like this photo of the two that he violently tore himself out of. Like, come on, if Vox really wanted to let go of the past between them, he would not have kept that thing around. Just like everything else Vox does, there's an extra emotional layer under this seemingly professional event. If you want my 2 cents, I like to think that when Vox started out, he was a pretty pitiable demon. Low on power, low on scare factor, low on general organization and infrastructure, a bit of a laughingstock in the eyes of hell. But that's when Alastor entered the picture. He introduced himself with words of encouragement and motivational mantra, pushing Vox to continue the upward climb to true overlord status. And he does. He forms connections with the other 2/3 of the Vees and slowly builds his empire. Emphasis on slowly, since he stumbled and fell over and over again, usually relying on his cohorts to pick up the slack. All the while, he started building up an emotional connection to Alastor. He went from seeing him as an idol, to a friend, to possibly something greater. This guy pulled him from the emotional gutter and made him the demon he is today. And maybe with time they could go from being business partners to just straight up partners. And then finally, at the apex of his conquest, when he's actually a respectable overlord, he celebrates by pouring himself out to his supposed longtime friend. He not only thanks Alastor for all he's done and even offers him a permanent position on his team, but he also lets some of his deeper emotions slip. He brings up all the things he really admires and enjoys about Alastor. All his admirable traits like his ambition, his ruthlessness, and his dad jokes. He says that he can't picture anyone else by his side while ruling the underworld. In fact, if his heart is truly steering him right, he might even love him. And then, laughter. Nothing but uproarious laughter from Alastor. Al then reveals that this entire debacle was just a means to an end for him. Maybe he had some secret motives like gathering resources on various overlords for later use, but he admits that the primary reason he stayed was for the entertainment. Vox is by far the most pathetic demon he's ever met in his time underneath, and seeing him squeal and squirm up the ladder to success, fumbling at every opportunity, it was just too hilarious for him to stay away.
I'll admit I've never been one to engage in television, but you certainly make a case for how entertaining it could be.
This leaves Vox both crushed and absolutely furious, which could be one of the major factors that sparks the first huge battle that they have with each other. Vox does an absolutely awful job on his own. Alastor has the upper hand pretty much the whole fight, and honestly, even if Al didn't have his powers, Vox wouldn't really be much of a threat. But then at the very end, thanks to the other Vees interfering and maybe some other outside factors, Alastor is defeated, leaving Vox the chance to grow his media empire and become the corporate giant we know today. It's totally possible that I'm taking their dynamic too far, and maybe Vox was just a scorned fanboy rejected by his idol who now wants revenge. But I don't know, the idea of exploring a serious one-sided crush in the Helliverse, where most ships are either mutual or just played for a joke, could be pretty dang interesting. Multiple years of thinking this guy was his only friend would definitely do a number on Vox's mental state, to the point where he'd need a freaking VPN to handle that much insecurity. It would also make his company's motto of "Trust Us" a little extra ironic and tragic, don't you think? But that concludes today's broadcast schedule. Overall, Vox is a character brimming with intrigue. His past self has the potential for emotional drama, his present self is a great parody of modern-day news hacks, and his future self might turn out to be a threatening and unstable big bad. But as always, tell me what you guys think. Are you as hooked on Vox as I am, or would it be in your best interest to just change the channel? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I hope to see you all real soon.